Hi, Mr. Hogan. Pleasure to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much for making the time.
Oh, absolute pleasure to be here.
I wanted to start off on the first project on this list, LNG Canada Phase 2. Shell, a lead project partner, has not made a decision on whether to go forward with Phase 2. What about today's announcement guarantees they will?
Well, this is exactly why the Prime Minister made the announcement he did today. The whole purpose of the projects of national interest, the whole purpose of the Major Projects Office is to get these major nation-building projects over the finish line, and that in many cases means helping them put together financial packages. In some cases it means helping them get through those regulations. And so, look, there's no guarantees in life, but one of the reasons that this project is on the list is because it's got a high likelihood of proceeding, and this is the nudge that will get it over the finish line.
What gives you the impression that it does have a high likelihood of proceeding? There aren't really a lot of regulatory hoops that need to be jumped through. At this point, it's really an investment decision. Shell has said that they would make that decision a long way from now, in fact, at the end of 2026, and it would depend on comparative investment opportunities. What are you doing to sweeten the pot?
Well, and that's exactly what the Major Project Office will be working through, and the reason it was referred for consideration is to look through what that package might need to be, what might need to be created in order to make sure that this project, which we think could create an awful lot of value for the country, you know, if it works for all parties, it can go forward. And so you're going to see, I think, a number of tools that are put at disposal, including getting through those final regulatory hurdles, for sure. But one of the things the Major Project Office is really about is helping them work through those decisions so that we can, you know, get to yes on projects that make sense.
How much of our money is your government willing to put up to see something like this happen? And I ask because Shell and the companies behind LNG Canada certainly are not short on profits. They want money from provincial and federal coffers, for example, to electrify this phase if it did go forward. That's not cheap. Are you willing to put more of our money up? And should you, given how profitable a company like Shell and others in this conglomerate are?
Well, you know, when we talk about financing and funding, there's lots of models there, right? There are loans, there are direct investments from government, there are grants, there are tax regulations that can be eased for these projects where, you know, it's better to get 80% of something than 100% of nothing, as they say. So I don't want to presuppose what the work of the Major Project Office will be on that front, but there are a number of levers that government can pull, and I think one of the things about this office and this announcement is government is signaling intent. We're going to find out how to do that. We're going to get to yes, and certainly we're going to do it in a way that has a positive return on investment for Canada, but these are questions that always come with major projects, and when you're in a world of global capital, you know, you've got to be competitive, and you've got to work with proponents to make sure that their projects are competitive.
This is something, though, that the federal government under the last Prime Minister was considering for a long time. The provincial government in BC has been considering as well. Like, this is a project that actually received its initial approval all the way back in 2015 as a package with Phase 1. What exactly are you telling Canadians tonight will change, other than all of a sudden your government says we want to do more? There's no details you're providing.
No, well, and it's the Major Project Office that'll work through those details, but this is what Bill C-5 did. Bill C-5 created a new set of tools that government can now lever, including the Major Project Office in moving forward. So what we have here is a project that has a very good likelihood of going forward, just needs a bit of a nudge, and you know, now it's over to the Major Project Office under the direction of the Prime Minister to figure out if something can be done.
But I guess I would push back respectfully on that. I don't understand what a nudge means. I think Canadians deserve to know what a nudge means. All that you are saying right now is that it's been placed on a list. Like, I don't know actually how that makes anything more competitive, how that entices Shell, what in principle, you know, your government would do to a profitable company that wants more hard-earned taxpayer money from Canadians. Like, there are no details at all.
Yeah, well, so whenever somebody's making an investment decision, they're going to be weighing return and they're going to be weighing risk. And that's ultimately going to be the calculation that drives whether that investment occurs or not. And we've got a couple of levers we can pull on either side. On return, you can look at making the project more profitable through, you know, some of the various investment decisions we may be able to assist with, maybe coordinate with, maybe, you know, tax breaks we can even work with the municipalities and the province on, things of that nature. And on risk, what we've signaled is the risk is low. The risk is low because the government government has said this is a project of national interest, and there will be, the reviews will happen in a prompt manner, and they will be shepherded through by the Major Project Office, as this project goes forward through consideration. It's a wonderful project moving forward, and ultimately these things come down to spreadsheets, and that is how these decisions get made, and we want to make sure when those spreadsheets are opened up that the ledgers are telling the story we need them to tell. Good return, low risk.
So let me ask you another question on mitigating that risk, because it's not just like the time that this takes that has been identified by the company as a risk factor. In fact, this company, LNG Canada, and others have identified central policies, for example, what's known as Bill C-69, the impact assessment policy, and in particular, the CEO of LNG Canada told the Globe and Mail that it's the emissions cap that's having an impact on their decision-making as well, and the probability or possibility of phase 2. Is your government going to keep the emissions cap in place?
Well, I think that's a question for the Minister of the Environment, but certainly I think one of the things the Major Project Office will do is bring forward some of those impediments, start talking about if there's other ways around them or if there are other changes that need to occur, and get down to business on doing that.
With all due respect, I would argue it's a question for any member of your government. It's a central plank of reducing emissions. It's supposed to be responsible for upwards of 30% of the emissions reductions by 2030. It is a key environmental and energy policy of the federal government. Is your government going to keep it or get rid of it? It's a key risk factor that companies across the energy sector have identified.
Well, I think you're going to be hearing more about climate competitiveness from the Minister of Environment over the fall. One of the things that I want to underline is, well, there's been a lot of focus on the Major Projects Office. There's been a lot of work the government's been doing over the summer, and I think you can expect a busy fall of announcements that will be reinforcing some things, shifting on other things, and you're going to have to stay tuned.
I'll rephrase the question. You're an MP from Alberta. I know that you've been around Alberta for a very long time. You understand the interests of the province and the companies there. Do you, in principle, support keeping that emissions cap?
Look, I think that the emissions cap is part of a belt and suspenders approach, right? We've always had the industrial carbon price as the main mechanism here, and the emissions cap was a suggestion of, okay, well, even within that context, we have another way that we might reduce emissions if necessary. So, look, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say, and there are a lot of ways that we can meet our climate objectives. I think what you're going to see is some pragmatism going forward. Certainly, I'm an advocate for pragmatism, but that doesn't mean anything is coming, going, or staying. It just means there's a lot of tools and there's a lot of options as we move forward on this stuff.
Respectfully, though, what does that mean? Again, I'll sort of push back on this idea that the emissions cap is just a tiny part of the emissions reduction plan. It's simply not. If you look at the Canadian Climate Institute's analysis, it could be equivalent anywhere from 20 to 30% of the reductions. The previous Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, called it a hallmark of your climate policy. Is it as insignificant as you're making it out to be? And do you, in principle, support it or not?
Well, I never said it was insignificant. I said there's multiple ways to get there, and we'll be looking at all of those ways to make sure that the Canadian economy is competitive while still meeting our climate objectives in the next bid.
Does that mean that your government hasn't ruled out fully getting rid of any of those policies? And I ask just because C5, in essence, would allow on a project-by-project basis your government to circumvent them, depending on the project. The opposition's challenge and some of industry have come forward saying that's not good enough, we want it all sort of rescinded. Have you not ruled out rescinding any of those marquee climate policies?
But there's a lot that's going to be coming out through the fall. And I think that everything is open for discussion because this is a pragmatic government. But that doesn't mean our overall goals have changed. We are still Liberals. We want to make sure that we're doing our duty on the climate and that we're pushing forward these projects in a responsible way. But yeah, I mean, I think pragmatism is going to rule the day, and we're going to talk to people about how we get there. You know, the oil and gas sector themselves are very seized with the idea of how you can reduce emissions. And I think when you look at some of the other strategies the Prime Minister announced, such as pathways, that opens up a world of opportunities. So you talk about how to reduce emissions in the long term. You talk about, what a cap could or would do or might be affected by. And major projects like that will have a big effect on the calculations.
Just finally, though, I would maybe counter, again, respectfully, the idea that oil companies are seized with that. What they're seized with is getting more taxpayer money to help fund the Pathways project. Is that something that your government is going to do? And should you, again, given the companies comprising the Pathways made record profits last year?
Yeah. They're seized with access to global capital, and they know that the world is shifting. The majority of investment is happening in the renewable space, and they know if they want to be competitive in that world, they need to work on emissions, and certainly all of the oil majors in Calgary understand that. And so it becomes a question about the art of the possible. What can we do? What do we make sure we have to put in place so that we're competitive with other producing jurisdictions? I mean, Canada's in a league of its own in terms of climate protections for oil-producing jurisdiction. And like I said, there's a lot of levers, there's a lot of pragmatism in this government. We're going to get things built, and we're going to get them built in a responsible way.
Should Pathways take that as a signal that your government is willing to put more taxpayer money in addition to the tax credits that already exist, which I believe amount to more than $8 billion between 2022 and 2030? Like, is there more federal money going to these oil companies?
It doesn't necessarily need to be that. When you look at Pathways and you look at its competitiveness or not, it's really pretty closely tied to industrial carbon pricing. If the cost of carbon is X, well, that's going to be in a balance sheet how much it's going to be worth to build the Pathways project. So working with provinces like Alberta, working with provinces like Saskatchewan, I think we can get some, some pretty responsible climate policies out there that allow us to be a superpower both in conventional as well as renewable. And it's a great example of how we can be innovative about these things and build whole new industries in the process. You get something like Pathways going, you've also created a Canadian-made carbon sequestration industry that has huge opportunities across the globe.
I will leave it on that note. Mr. Hogan, truly appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.